Good morning. Good to see you all. Let's see, I know it's been a while. I think we had an all hands in August, I think, somewhere around that time frame. Then we had a furlough. Some other things happened. So it's been a bit. We did just have a retreat from our team last week, or a week before last. So it was a good time. And of course, something happened. Something happened in Huntsville. So what we're going to do is talk a little bit about that and where we are on the programs, and then sum it up, and then looking forward to your questions. So let's go to the next page, which I think is on everybody's mind. So so the vice president, of course, he's been here twice, but he actually went to Huntsville once. I'm just kidding. I kid Jody about that. So anyway, he went, and Space Council was there. He made a really, really powerful speech, talked about a lot of stuff. So I pulled really the three key things. One, he talked about, obviously, as you know, he talked about getting people on the surface of the moon in 5 years, but actually he said 24, so it's really 4.5 years, something like that, if you add it up. It's very quick, very exciting, and so we'll talk a lot about where we're headed with that. But he did say also not just to plant the flag, but establish a foundation for eventual mission to Mars. And if you remember Space Policy Directive 1, which he was also a big part of getting done, sustainability was a big part of that. So he's reaffirming it here. It's not just getting there, right, but getting there and so we can stay. Sustainability is big, and that will affect a lot of the things that we'll talk about. But I really liked, he said a lot of things, but I really liked the comments, of course, on the bottom right, where he has faith in the extraordinary ingenuity and capability of the men and women of NASA and America's space enterprise, and their ability to meet these challenges if given the resources and the support to do it. So, you know, this reaffirms, I think, our leadership's confidence in NASA, how important NASA is, how important our missions are to the United States and to the world. So, you know, a really great charge and confidence in us to go do this mission. And of course, we all know, you know better than anybody since you've been here working, doing the work, that there are a lot of challenges to make this happen. So right now, and I'll talk about some more details later, the NASA is working very hard to put together, actually formulate this strategy to get people to the surface of the moon by 2024, end of 2024, New Year's Eve 2024. So give ourselves every day we can. But the JSC has key leaders as a part of those teams. Obviously, Bill Gerstenmaier as the HEOAA is the lead for that. There is now will eventually be a new AA named Mark Sarangelo. You might have heard Mark's coming on board. He's part of this Moon to Mars organization that Jim Bridenstine is setting up. Under that organization will be the gateway, as well as these updated lunar plans, and as well as technology will be under Mark. But Mark and Bill are working very closely together, and they are formulating this plan, and Johnson Space Center is participating on a daily, hourly basis on how that's coming together. So I'll talk a little bit more about specifically where we are and what we know today. So really big, very exciting. I was at the National Space Symposium yesterday. It's in Colorado Springs. It's a fascinating meeting where leaders all over the world are there. Our international partners, as well as all the NASA and aerospace leaders are there. So a lot of buzz about how to make this happen, a lot of good conversations about what we can each do to make that happen. So exciting time. So I'll get into more of that in a minute. If you go to the next page, so of course this is our vision statement. Remember, dare to expand our frontiers, unite with our partners to achieve bold missions, and to explore space to benefit humanity. So it's even more important today after that charge. We knew it was important before, but it's even more now as we look at this new mission. So let's talk about exploration. So if we go to the next page, you know we have 6 people in space at this very moment. 6 incredible people, and they are counting on us every day. These are the April of 2019 Space Explorers. They are a very talented group, and if we go to the next page, of course, this team did an incredible thing. We had back-to-back-to-back EVAs. All 4 folks were rookies, never gone outside before we started this plan. The team, obviously the astronauts, but then the folks that work the suits and FOD and all the program people and everybody else made this happen, made it look seamless, right? They were flawless. The team did an outstanding job, and all the astronauts performed incredibly. To me, this is just an example. Sometimes I think people take this for granted, that it's going to be awesome and easy, but this was very hard to do. And this is an example of the great work that you do every day to make exploration happen. And also that we need to keep our minds on this incredible, important, and difficult work that we do every day. If we go to the next page, though, I want to remind people that space station is essential for exploration, a deep space exploration, including the moon. And you know we do experiments every day on how the human body behaves in deep space. We're learning stuff every day about that. The twin study is coming out soon, so we're learning a lot about how space affects people, things that we will need to know as we send people to the moon and beyond. And the other great thing about station, which I think you know, but a lot of people like to talk about commercial contracting and how to work that, the space station guys, and those of you and those of us that support the space station, where a lot of the center does, really actually made it happen, took the word and actually implemented it, and we've learned a lot about what's worked and what has not worked, and those will be key lessons as we go forward onto the moon. And so this LEO commercialization, which station is still working very hard on, is going to be critical to our future, and we need to keep our mind on that. So station continues to be an essential part of what we're going to need to do to go into deep space, and I want to thank the team that works that every day. Let's go to the next chart. So, you know, with all the buzz about the speech, some people have forgotten we actually flew Demo 1. The commercial crew program is coming very close to flying people. We are coming very close to flying people on U.S. rockets from the Kennedy Space Center. And this was a really, really incredible day. I was fortunate to be there on launch day, and then here when we were doing docking and everything else. The team did, both the SpaceX and the NASA team did an awesome job, and we learned a bunch. We learned a bunch about how much more we have to do to get ready to fly people. If you work these programs, you know we have some difficult challenges to get ready to actually put people on here, but they are not insurmountable in any way. They're things that we have plans for. And it's exciting that our goal, of course, is to fly people certainly by the end of the year. And I think that's definitely achievable, but we have a lot of work to do. But it was really exciting to see it launch and dock, the crew get inside, right? We're very, very close. Great team. If you go to the next page, of course, we have not just one, but two companies about to do this. Boeing now is getting very close to flying their uncrewed flight. And if you see on the left, the interesting thing about when we fly people on the Boeing test flight, the crew we're working to actually have that crew stay on board for a while. And you see Chris Ferguson in there and the other astronauts doing training on EVA. So that crew will stay on board and help the increment crew. So it's a little bit different than the first SpaceX crew, but a bunch going on. So as you know, and you support those programs, there's a bunch of paperwork coming in, there's some key tests going on, so it's very, very, very intense, very, very important. And we cannot take our eye off the ball on these programs, right? It's a big deal. Important to get done, important to make sure that we're ready to sign, just like we talked about last time, that we're doing the work we need to do. And we will fly, as I said before, we'll fly when we're ready. So I'm re-emphasizing that today because we're getting to crunch time on these. So I also want to remind you that if you are supporting these programs, and I'm sure the workload is pretty heavy, if the stress is building because we're getting close, remember we're in this together, right? We have a team to work this together. You work with your supervisor if you're struggling with the workload or with how to make decisions and things that come up. Remember, again, like I said, we're a team. We're going to work this together, and we're going to fly when we're ready. But this is really, really cool. We're getting really, really close. And these programs are essential to help support Space Station. And as I said, Space Station's essential for getting us onto the moon. Okay, so when we go to the moon, and actually it'll be in 22 with crew, they're going to fly on Orion. And Orion is getting, as you know, EM1 is basically finished. The craft is done. Now we're sending it to Plumbrook to do the kind of qualification tests you would expect, thermal vac and other things. We're also finishing some of the abort recovery testing. And on the far right, this gives a shout out to our White Sands team. We're doing hot fire test of the OMS engine. That's a key part of the service module out at White Sands, which is the service module, obviously, is how we get around on Orion when we get out into space. So great work to be that close. If you go to the next page, we have a big test for Orion coming up in June, where we'll do an ascent abort, which allows the launch abort tower, which you see on the right. And its job is to get Orion off in emergency early in flight when the rocket is at max Q. Very difficult time for the capsule to come off, and it's a very important one for us to test to make sure it works well. And the team has done a great job. We accelerated this test, as you remember, a year and a half ago, and they've met every milestone other than they didn't expect to get furloughed. So we lost that month with the furlough, but they're right on plan, and we look forward to that test in June. So before I go, don't switch charts, but before I go to the next, let's talk a little bit about the lunar plan. So again, we'll get to the moon with people on Orion. So we're in the process now, as I said before, with Gerstenmaier and Mark Sorangelo of putting together, formulating a plan. Bill's been really clear, and Jim has too, that since we're so close, 4.5 to 5 years, depending on how you count, the way to get there quick is to use the stuff we have that's in process, which includes Orion and SLS, and then to look at everything else we have and decide whether that's helping us or not helping us get to the moon quick. This includes not just the technical stuff, but also process stuff. I expect that we'll have a lot more clarity within the next month, maybe month and a half, on exactly what the architecture looks like. But I expect it'll take us a little longer to work the acquisition plan out, right? Which it should, right? We want to make sure we do it right so we get the best chance to meet the dates, meet the expectations. I'll talk a little bit about Gateway coming up. That Gateway plan is also being adapted to affect going quicker. But this is basically the strategy is, okay, let's use what we have, let's accelerate what we can, and for the new stuff, how can we do it as quickly and efficiently as possible? And remember, keeping sustainability in mind. So let's go to the Gateway. So my intent was to have Dan Hartman come up here and talk to you about the Gateway, or Laura Kearney, but they both had conflicts today. Those of us that were in Colorado that flew out of Denver had a little trouble getting home. I flew out of Colorado Springs, so it worked for me. But I will have them come and talk at a future All Hands. The Gateway team has been stood up. Dan, of course, is the lead program manager. Laura Kearney is his deputy. He's announced, and we'll put out a KPA about the rest of the staff. The key leads have been assigned. And this is a multi-NASA team, including key folks at Marshall, Glenn, and others. They'll actually they're putting together their PPBE, their budget submittal for the first time as an integrated program, so terrific. This is a chart of a configuration for the Gateway that was actually approved by NASA and its other international partners a couple of months ago. And it shows the power prop element is the bus, then an ESA module and a utilization module. You see that utilization module is a key part that Johnson is going to lead and pull together as well. And then there's habitation, both international and US, and then you see Orion on the far right. There's also a logistics module, all the things you need to support this small but critical outpost around the moon. Now, this configuration was agreed to before the speech. I'll just call it the speech. You probably know what I mean. Before the speech. So now, the team had thought about this before, but what the emphasis now is, this is still the right configuration, but what can we do early without waiting for the whole thing to be done? What could you do early to support an Orion and a lander docking and basically pulling together approach to get to the surface quickly? So you wouldn't wait for all these habitats to be done, which is what we want for the long term. What would you do early, especially with the utilization module, that could allow you to dock early with the PPE and a lander and transfer the crew and get the lander to the surface? So that's what Dan and his team are adapting to. So I think we'll see some changes in the configuration a bit to basically assist, enable an early landing. So great work by the team. It's not unusual. I've been on a lot of programs. I've never been on a program that didn't start with a plan and then say, oh, hey, by the way, why don't we adapt this? And I think that's appropriate. The whole idea of the Gateway is to assist in a sustainable manner access to the moon. So now let's talk about, if the data's earlier, what we would change. But I wanted to show you the next chart, because I think there's been some, these kind of things may not trickle down to everybody, and this is really about why a gateway. If we're going to go fast, why would we have a gateway at all? And so, again, the key part about this is sustainability. If we had a lunar program, I mean, I was 11, but we had a lunar program, and we stopped it. We had people on the moon, and we stopped it. A large part of that was it was awesome, and it was extremely expensive. And we threw everything away, right? I mean, they did. They changed the world, so I'm not complaining at all about the architecture. It was incredible. But if you're going to do it again, you got to think about an architecture that allows you to reuse as much as possible to get the cost closer to fit in the budget so we can do more stuff. So the great thing about the Gateway is, while the first mission, it takes more delta V overall in the first mission, the fact that we can reuse the ascent and maybe even the descent lander every mission saves us a bunch of money. So overall, using the Gateway reduces our costs and also delta V. The Gateway also is a way for us to, if you remember back when we were talking about Mars a lot, it's a great orbit to coalesce things and eventually send them on to Mars. So it is a great transition to our next mission as well. And also, it allows us to increase our partnerships, international partners and others. If you're going direct to the moon, there's fewer pieces, right? And our partnerships with our international partnerships is really important. So anyway, there's more there. If you have more questions, I think as I said before, we'll have Dan come here, and the next time we get a chance, we'll talk a little bit more about this. But the Gateway is critical to an overall sustainable lunar access approach. And now we're just modifying it to say we don't need the whole thing, but what do we need to access the surface quickly? So anyway, I want you to see that. You might still have more questions about that. If you do, I'd be glad to answer them. So let's talk about the lunar plan as we know it. So we lovingly refer to this as the swoosh chart, because you can see there's a swoosh of green. You've seen it before. When a year ago when I was up there, we had a plan to send people to the surface, but it was one, they landed around 2028, and I would say it was fairly immature because really part of it was trying to figure out how it fit in the budget that we had. So what the Vice President has told us to do, so you would see 2028 is maybe where that person is, way on the far right there. So now the red line is 2024. So the idea now is to say, okay, if you had to pull this back, what would you change, right? How would you adapt this plan? And that's what NASA's going through today, and that's what our teams are supporting HEO and assessing. But I want to talk a little about going from left to right and what it looks like. You see down in the bottom is something that's called small commercial landers. This is something that is a science program. Commercial Landed Payload Services is actually the four letters, and CLIPS is the acronym that we use. The whole idea here is to start out with some small payloads, and we get some new entrants into the program. So we had 9 companies that were awarded contracts under this contract, and now we have payloads, and we say, you tell us how you get this payload to the surface. And we have money ready to award to them. So this is a way of getting new entrants into the business of delivering things to the moon, which is, again, part of how do we get a sustainable plan. We get competition, we get new people, we get innovation. So this is a great start. This program, or this initiative, is led out of JSC. You may not know that. Chris Colbert is the guy who is leading this team. There's a lot of people, procurement, legal, other people are doing great things and changing the world and thinking about how to do this better. And I was at the Space Symposium, I tell you, I got a lot of great feedback from these small companies saying that this team is doing a great job leaning forward and allowing them to innovate and do great things. So this is the beginning of trying to get to the moon in a different way. Now, transitioning a small guy throwing payloads is much different than landing people. I get that. But I think there'll be a lot, we're going to learn a lot in this early phase that should help us as we're trying to get to landing people. The next phase was there's some mid-sized landers that science is delivering to the moon. that allows us to do more science. We actually have a team participating in the rover part of that, where we would actually start sending a science rover to the moon. Johnson has people that are actually participating in that effort as well. So we have a lot of tentacles in how do we get to the moon. Now, okay, now how about the lander, which is the part everybody's interested in? So if you think about a lander, what's the part that you would expect Johnson would have a key role in it? Well, that would be what I would call the piloted vehicle part, the ascent module, right, where the crew is, how they interact with the vehicle, and then the integration of that ascent with the rest of the vehicle. That's the part that Johnson has a great experience with Orion and Shuttle and other programs, and that's the part that we are working hard to play a key role. We certainly have the expertise, and that's our intent. So now Heo, Bill, and Mark, and with support from us, is thinking about what is the right architecture? Is it 3-piece, 2-piece, ascent, descent? You need a transfer orbit because Gateway's pretty high, or excuse me, a transfer module because Gateway's pretty high. How does that look? And then how would we buy it, right? How much do we make? How much do we go out and procure? And we're looking at different ways of, again, getting innovation, trying to get competition as long as possible to keep our costs down. So you might have heard of something called a broad area announcement. It's a procurement technique where we ask for contractors to bid on their ability to do this job, and then we seed some money. It gives them a chance to innovate, and then we keep competition as long as possible before we select. That you might have seen some of those have been released. That's the beginning of us trying to figure out the best way to go acquire this system. So a lot of work, a lot of it's behind the scenes. I expect we'll see more clarity in the next month and a half, but I'll just let you know that under John McCullough, you remember we have EISD, Exploration Integration Systems Division. That whole division was set up that Ellen created it to basically be our kind of new business program for new things that are coming. John McCullough is the head of that organization. It's a great team, and he's our focus for pulling this together. And of course, he's pulling on all the other programs to help us have good proposals in that. So again, working hard. I expect to see more details in the next month. It's going to be difficult. It's going to be challenging. We need to take some risks in how we buy stuff in order to meet these dates. So I expect this is going to be really interesting. I would say I did want to comment on our administrator, who I think, one, does a really good job communicating, right? He has a passion, or you can tell Jim really has a passion for NASA and for these missions. But I tell you what I was very encouraged by is Jim also has a very good understanding of how Washington works. And in Washington, it doesn't matter if you have an awesome Delta V plan and a mass margin strategy. It doesn't matter, right? There's a lot about what resonates with the administration and how you get something through Congress, and Jim is really good at that. So that gives me a lot of confidence that we give Jim a good plan. He's going to know what it takes to get that through, which includes budget, right, and expectations. So that was very encouraging to me. Okay, so that's what we know today. A lot of work to do. Johnson's going to play a key role, and we're still fleshing out the details. Let's go to the next page. So in August, we talked about under this Dare Unite Explore and our philosophy, we had 3 teams, you might remember. We had a Mission Tempo, Let's Get Ready to Fly. We had Shape the Future team, and we had Enhance Our Value. So we still have those 3 areas, and I'm going to talk about where we are in each one, because like I said, we had a retreat about a week and a half ago where we talked about 2024 and some of the things we need to go do differently, and that is impacting our plan, and I'll show you that now. So let's go to Achieve a Mission Tempo. You remember this was the team that said, hey, we're about to launch again. It's been a while since we launched from Florida. It's not easy. It can be pretty intense, but we've done it before, and we just need to get on the same plan and help the team. We had, there's actually over 29 actions. 25 have been done and closed, and some of these actions were pretty straightforward. Well, they sound simple. That's what I should say. They sound simple, but they're important and difficult to do. Some of the actions were clarifying our COFR responsibilities. In others, what are you signing for? and commercial crew. Let's say if you're a system manager, what is exactly is your role? Integrating those across all the systems to make sure we're balancing risk. And Demo 1 was we did that work before, and Demo 1 was a great run through as we get ready to roll up to flying people. We talked a lot within organizations to share down and in about how decisions are made, if the team is struggling with decisions, how to bring those up, and including at senior staff. We had good conversations about communicating schedule expectations. I think in some of the commercial crew, there was a lot of constraints on when you could talk about schedules, what the schedules really were. But now within senior staff, we have good conversations about likelihood dates so that the technical teams can plan their work better and schedule their work better and try to minimize overload. Seems like a simple thing, but it was important for us to do. And the one other example I would give you is we're coming up with a strategy on how to celebrate our big milestones, like splashdown parties, those kind of things. Seems simple, but I think it's really important for us to say when we're working really, really hard, we're also celebrating together, and we'll roll that out in the coming weeks. So it's very, very important, very serious about making this happen. Like I said, it was a lot of work, and I hope that you're seeing it and believing it's helping you. What I would say, the bottom line was, again, we talked a little bit about 2024, and a lot about getting 2024 is not about Delta V's, right? It's going to be about how we work, right? What are the processes we use to get done? So we're targeting some specific things that we know were put in place maybe originally that were helpful, but maybe now they're becoming a burden or maybe not actually meeting their intent. And I'll throw some easy examples out, would be 7120. And some other processes that are good rules, but they can become time sinks, I would say. So we had a target list, and we're going to go off and attack those. Next page. So shape the future. This is pretty straightforward. Make sure Johnson is ready to help in developing these architectures. I've already talked about that first sub-bullet under John McCullough and the leadership of this center. We are working to develop that plan and help them flesh that out. The second sub-bullet is an example of something that we're doing entirely on our own. We weren't asked to do it, but our intent is to have I would call it a workshop where we're inviting key leaders from the commercial companies and academia and talk a little bit about what does NASA do that helps you, what does NASA do that hurts your ability to get investors, and think about the moon as, when we get to the moon, where NASA in the long run might be one of many customers. So it's a way to create, again, a sustainable economy around the moon. So ask people whose business it is to think about those things. And then we would create white papers that we would share with our team, procurement, legal, programs, right? Let's ask the people who are in the business to make that happen. And on the bottom, if you're in a program and you work a program a lot, you know that we have some great companies that do great work. We do see some struggles with contract performance. Some of that is a NASA responsibility, but some of it is our supplier base. If you know, we have this country with the ramp down of programs is struggling in some areas, both buying valves, simple things like buying valves. We're having trouble getting companies that have that expertise, and it's affecting our ability to hit schedule. So if we're trying to get somewhere in 2024, what are the things we should think about now to improve our supplier base? So next page is enhance our value. This is about us as a workforce at JSC. The first one is enable an agile and flexible workforce. So how do we hire? How do we train? How do we keep our skills where they need to be? There were each of your organizations had an action to come back to me and as a senior team to talk about their plans, long-term plans for hiring and succession management and all those things to make sure that we have the best team. What I would say, we have a great team to make sure we continue to have a great team into the future. And we are getting a lot of good help, I would say, from headquarters in this regard under Bob Gibbs and Brady Pyle and others. They are starting to free up and give us hiring authorities that we didn't have before. So we can be more targeted when we know we have a gap. We can be more targeted in hiring some of those skills that haven't been able to do in the past. So, and we need to be more agile. The second sub-bullet is really, once we have the lunar plan, we'll align the JSC workforce, right? That seems pretty straightforward. It's a complicated thing because a lot of you working very hard on those other programs I just mentioned, and we need to do those well. So how are we going to work together to phase what we need to phase off of some of those into these new programs? It's a complicated thing, but it's a big deal. And then the last item is, as important as ever, is the diversity and inclusion. Again, our idea is we got to make sure that we're accessing the full team to make sure we have the best team possible. It continues to be a key area, key focus for us. So, before I leave this chart, well, actually go to the next chart, I think it's the right. Yeah, good. So you might be saying, so what's changing? Right, we got this speech, what changed? So we are in the process of changing the architecture, that is the Delta V's, the cool pictures, all those kind of things. But now we have the hard job to figure out how we're going to work differently and how we're going to actually allocate our workforce to make that happen. But we need to grab this opportunity, right? We have a real good opportunity. One, they have faith in us. We need to grab this opportunity and interrogate everything that we do, process, and ensure are they helping us to get to landing by 2024 or not. And it's a great opportunity, I would think, to focus and highlight the things that work and change some of the things that don't work, and that's our intent. That's our intent. The last thing I would do is show you, we have a website on Dare Unite Explore, and each of the directors has been asked to talk a little bit about what they think this means to them and their organization. So if you chance, go ahead and take a look at that. Very good information. I think it's important for each of the directors to take this message and interpret it themselves. And that's basically the plan. If you go to the next page, I think that's it. Yeah, good. So a lot to do. Very exciting time. I think we have more going on here than maybe ever, and very important and difficult things, so it's a really exciting time, and our goal is to plan it and execute it in the best manner possible. So let's go ahead. I think we have a list of questions people asked beforehand, and we'll go tick down through those. So Isidro, you want to go ahead and
Sure.
read the first one?
All right, Mark, people have the opportunity to vote their questions up. So the first question is actually a Flex Friday question. So there's not a lot of time between now and 2024. Is there still the potential that Flex Fridays may be going away?
Wow. Okay. Well, it jumped to the top. Okay.
It did.
So that's a really good question. So what I would like to do, we at our retreat, I asked this exact question. And so we are going to continue. We're going to continue Flex Friday. But what I want to do, I will send out a note from me that has some subtleties about, I think, what the intent of this day is supposed to be, and what its meaning is. But I don't want to go off the cuff. I want to send. It's important, right? This is something that JSC does. So how do we use it in the context of this very intense period we have? So
Okay.
so you won't have to wait till the next All Hands. You won't have to ask me at the next All Hands. There will be. But we are not deleting it. I'll be clear. But I think there's some subtleties about what the intent of this day should be, and I'll send that out in an email.
Okay.
Yeah.
The next question. 109 votes. Half the workforce rolled their eyes at the announcement that we will return to the moon in 2024. How do we shift that culture?
Okay. Did they roll one of their eyes? Is that what that means? It's half of their work? Sorry. That'd be hard to do. I don't know if half is true, but I can imagine that if you've been here more than 15 years, you probably heard a couple of speeches. And if you lived through Constellation, right, there might be a little bit of that. But here's what I would say, a couple things. So there's a couple of things that make me feel like this is different. One, it's the vice president. He's been here many times, so it's not some general speech made in the context of hundreds of other speeches. This guy's been here. He's been all over NASA. He's very committed. So I think that means we have that's different than what I've seen in the past, that we have someone who's actively engaged, who actually is very close to the president. That matters, because there's other parts of the administration that I won't name, those parts of the administration, that will be a struggle because they're trying to control the budget. So I think we have an advocate very close to the president. That is different. Two, Jim, I mentioned it before, but Jim understands Congress, right? In the past, I felt like we've had really awesome leaders, but they did not know how to work Congress maybe as effectively as possible. And you know, Congress actually writes the check. Somebody can make a speech, but Congress has to write the check. And I believe Jim is very pragmatic, and he understands how that works. So I think if there's anybody that can take our plan and work it on both sides, it's going to be Jim. So I'm very encouraged by that. The third thing I would say is different. I think we've learned a lot as a team, working all the different things we've worked, right? Shuttle, station, Orion, commercial crew, commercial cargo, you know, all the technology we've done, clips. We've learned a ton of things about, depending on what we're trying to get, what might be the most efficient way to get what we need. And we have a whole tool set now that I think is available to us, which I think gives us a better shot of giving them a plan that has some chance, right? So, I don't know that it'll be exactly 2024, but I think that we need to take this opportunity and we need to run, right? They're putting their faith in us, and we need to run. And we need to run as hard and as fast as we can and put together the best plan we think we can that we think can execute this. And it also gives us an opportunity to streamline some things that have been bugging us, right? Because I intend to use that speech, hey, does this get us to the moon by 2024? On things that I think are not crew safety things, you know what I mean, really. So I'm actually very encouraged. And the other thing that I've seen in the past that worries me, it worried me a little bit when they created a new organization. You know, because I have a lot of faith in Bill Gerstenmaier. You might know Bill Gerstenmaier. He's got a mustache. went to Purdue. He's a pretty good guy. So we have faith in Bill. And I don't know Mark Sarangelo as well, but what I hear about Mark, he's a very good strategic thinker, and thinking of new ways of doing things. And he also has people outside the agency that he can influence. So I think that's really good. And more importantly, he and Bill are talking. I mean, all this week at the end, they were together, tied at the hip. And in the past, I've seen in Washington where you have two different organizations and they don't talk. And it wasn't that long ago, 2005, 2006. So I'm very encouraged by that too. So I'm seeing NASA do the things, and the NASA leadership do the things that I have not seen done well in the past. So that's encouraging to me. So.
Okay, next question.
It's a good question though, because I think that's in the back of people's minds.
Next question at 94 votes. What changes to the workforce do you see at JSC if Congress does not give NASA more funding for a 2024 lunar landing, yet the direction remains the same?
So first, that's a hypothetical, right? It assumes a lot. One, they don't give us the money. Two, they tell us to do the same thing. I don't think that will happen, actually, by the way. I don't think both of those will happen at the same time. If they did, then that means they're telling us to not do something else, and I would have to guess what that was. And without knowledge, I couldn't tell you what we would do in the workforce. So I said, let's not go there yet, right? Let's put together a good plan that puts together the things we know we need to execute, and then we'll see where it goes. And if we get feedback, we'll adapt as we go. But yeah.
Okay, the next question, 57 votes. How can we reduce bureaucracy to cut unnecessary overhead and enable a moonshot, something that's critical to recapturing America's imagination?
Yeah, great question. So this was the conversation we had as a senior leadership team last week. Or weekend, I don't know. A while, less than a week ago. Same thing. And we came up with a good list of things that bug us. But I think one of the best conversations we had is, it's often easy to say that those guys stink. I wish they would get off my back. We need to think about the things that we do also. What are the things that I do that I believe had some benefit, but maybe I need to decide, I need to work hard to see if really it's getting NASA closer to its mission. That's hard to do. So we have some specific targets. We're looking at 7120 is an easy one. Well, let's say it's easy to say. We're going to have to talk about what of that we think have worked for us and not worked for us. I do think, though, again, what puts us in a good spot is we've gone through these programs, and I think we have pretty good evidence on those processes we use that have helped us and which ones really have caused us more overhead. But the charge is on all of us, starting with me at my meetings and other things I do, and to you. What are the things really, is this thing necessary to get us to the moon? So if you have things in your mind and things that you've seen, I encourage you to work up through your supervisor and bring those ideas forward. So we have some targets, but really the power is going to come from people like you and the work you do. Identify you things you think would be more efficient.
Okay, next question, 57 votes. Will the longevity of space station support be cut to divert funding and attention to lunar ops, 2028 versus 2032 versus 2035?
Yeah, so will station be cut to support the landing? So I think Jim is pretty clear in his statements that station is needed, and I emphasize it here today. Station is needed for our research and understanding how the body and how systems work in space. Station is needed because we just started these commercial crew we haven't flown one yet with people in it. And these companies invested a lot to be providing this service. So if we cancel that thing early, what's the likelihood we're going to get commercial companies to invest money and go into the moon in order to get a market, right? Very little. Also, the United States is going to need low Earth orbit capability forever, from now on and forever. It doesn't mean it's ISS, but it's going to need low Earth orbit capability forever. Just basically getting our crews ready for deep space and research. Now, the goal, and this is what the station team is working really hard on, what is the right transition date? Forget about policy statements or what's in the appropriations bill. What is the right transition date to take this incredible station we have and transition it to something that is more, maybe meets our future needs in LEO, which will probably be smaller, would not need the size that we're talking about. So what is the right transition plan? And NASA is working that very hard, and it is really important. We know as a minimum there are limitations to how long it will last. We can't wait till it starts breaking apart. Team knows that. We got to have a plan. And I think what gets lost in this speech and people saying, oh, 28's the right date or 32's the right date, is we need a plan. What is the right transition plan? Including, is there any possibility that we could transition some of this work to a commercial entity, right? What would their motivation be? How would we enhance their ability to make money so we would become one of many customers again, right? All that's part of this strategy. So we need a good strategy. The station team is working it very hard. But clearly, to me, we're going to need this station. It can't end in 23. That makes no sense to me. So if somebody says we're going to cut it, think about that. If you're going to support a 2024 date, you got to put the thing in the water tomorrow, right? Which we're not going to do. So we need a plan that flies station and gives us a good transition and allows us to fly on to the moon by 2024, which is a challenge, right? Which is a challenge. But anyway. That's a great question, because I think people are really worried about that. They say, well, the only way this is going to work is if you end station. Ending station now does not work. It doesn't close, so.
Okay, the next question, 55 votes. What direction have you been given by Administrator Bridenstine regarding changes to enable a 2024 lunar landing given the contractual nature of most of our work? What flexibility is there to make changes?
Well, Jim hasn't given me any specific direction. I think I've told you the work we're doing to put together a plan. And so Jim's direction is more, I would say, from a strategic sense. Hey, this is really important. We need to put together a good plan. If we put together a good plan, he believes we can get support. That's the kind of direction he gives me. Really more of the technical direction comes from Gerstenmaier. And we're supporting that, as I said before, looking at the technical options as well as ways to buy this hardware.
Okay, the next couple of questions, we have one vote apiece. So is 2024, if 2024 is the goal, why not scrap the whole gateway concept and go old school Apollo? Gateway benefits us how?
Good, so I think that chart gave you an idea of the fundamental reasons why. And while old school, I went to an old school, by the way, and I was old school. But our goal is not to go and then end, right? Our goal is to go and stay. And it's easy to say. The hard part is putting together an architecture that's sustainable and enhances reuse, and that's what the gateway does. So if we're down to one vote questions, maybe I'll open it up. Maybe let's try a couple from the audience. If anybody, before we go to one vote, anybody from the audience have a question? Put you on the spot. Okay, we'll think about it. We'll go to another question, and you can.
Okay, then the next.
Why don't you work your way over while he reads a question, because you should be in the mic. Go ahead.
All right, the next question, an important one, 44 votes. Are you excited for the new Star Wars movie being announced in the next hour?
Yes. I haven't heard about that, actually. Yeah.
Okay, is this on?
Yeah.
So I like the plan for going back to the moon, but conspicuously absent was any talk of a spacesuit. Oh. So I assume my bosses are thinking about that, but footprints implies a boot, implies a suit, which the only ones exist in the Smithsonian. So what is the suit plan? And I'm sure my bosses are thinking about it. So it would be helpful if you could communicate that to us as it develops.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, good question. It was completely just a miss. Clearly you need a suit if you want to come home. And the JSC, I mentioned the ascent. I should have mentioned the suit. Obviously, JSC is the world leaders for those kind of things, so we are part of that team too. You might know before the speech, we had a strategy where we were really doing development. So we were buying pieces, and JSC in-house with our talented support contractor staff have been developing a plan to build key components and test them on space station, so we could build our way to a new suit. At that time, there wasn't necessarily transition talking about that being a surface suit, which, as you know, is more complicated. So we're in the process of updating that plan to create a surface suit. And as you know also, since you're part of that team, one of the goals of this suit would be more adjustable to different body sizes. Not that that has come up in the last month at all. But that's really important. And that's really important because we need to maximize the ability of the suit, since these very talented people we have that we're putting into space, that we can adapt and make sure we're optimizing their effectiveness. So I hope that answered your question. We had a plan. Exactly what it looks like to 2024, we're still fleshing out, is what I would say. But JSC will be the lead for that, there's no doubt, and exactly how that comes together. As you know, that's pretty aggressive, given we had a plan and we kind of got smacked every time. We were trying to put together something, and we really haven't been able to get started as much as we would like in the past. So that's one more thing that has to be accelerated. Anybody else in the audience? Thanks for asking that, though. It was a total miss. Okay, go ahead, go to the next question.
Okay, with the new direction and budget, do you see a shift in workforce from less civil servants to more contractors?
I don't see a significant change in the number of civil servants, down or up. That's what I would say. So we've got to figure out in the work we have, right, what are the leadership roles, what are the key parts that civil servants are going to keep doing, and what are the parts that we're going to contract out. So at a top line, I don't see us growing civil servants, and I don't see it shrinking. So now it's a matter of where we're putting our folks, where our expertise is needed.
Okay, we have about 10 minutes left, Mark.
Okay.
The Office of STEM Engagement is facing a zero budget. What is the plan to inspire students without the office?
So that comment is about, in the president's budget, this is, you know how it works. The president proposes, and then Congress enacts, and I keep forgetting the word, supposes. They actually write the check. So, yeah, disposes, sorry, I knew I'd get the word. I just tell you, this is a game between these two agencies, and they cut it, and they know Congress is going to put the money back in. I feel really bad for the educators who have to deal with this every year, but I'm confident that the office will be funded, that Congress will continue to appropriate the monies for that. So I know it's hard though when you're sitting there feeling like they keep cutting it, but frankly, it's a budget game at this level. But I expect the office will be funded, and they do an awesome job for the limited amount of money that they get.
Hey, Mark, so leveraging off the EVA discussion, what do you think sustainability in 2028 means? I mean, our plate is full, but we might think about rovers or surface habitats or ISRU. So what do you think the early targets for sustainability are by 2028?
Yes. Yeah, it's a great question. I'm trying not, I don't want to be too specific, but give you a reasonable answer. To me, so I would like to bite off as one piece at a time. Mm-hmm. So they're very clear they want to get us to the surface quick. Mm-hmm. So that's what we're going to figure out how to do first. But I think the gateway is a good example that we need an architecture that allows us to keep the costs of that lander system to a reasonable amount. Mm-hmm. We're in the process of making other choices like the size, crew size, and everything else that we need to keep sustainability in mind. In other words, what's the long-term plan on the surface? You know, really you just want to go down to a very small thing that then we're right, you know, and that's the struggle that we're having at the moment. Well, so in this design of the lander, this first lander, we've got to be keeping the long-term plan in mind, including how do you get cargo eventually to the surface and those kind of things.
And I can imagine once we have this infrastructure, we can actually use the gateway and the landers to kind of survey the different locations and maybe find the right places and things like that. That might be one.
Exactly. That's the beauty of the gateway, right? When people aren't there, we can move it very Delta V efficient and get ourselves in a different location, allows access to different parts of the moon, mm-hmm. which is the key. But so thank you. You're pulling on a really important point. In the long term, it will really multiply our ability to stay there if we're using the resources that are on the moon. And so what I really like about these small commercial landed payload services that science is doing, we can throw a lot of things and investigate a lot of places and test some technologies. So before we send people to those locations, we've maximized where we want to go. So I think that's a key part of it. Yeah, thanks.
Hi, could you please elaborate a little bit more? You were talking about that under your Shape the Future bullet about the workshop that you self-initiated, your vision for dialoguing with commercial and academia, and just trying to understand, you're looking to understand and creating a sustainable economy, but you elaborate a little bit more about what your vision is and your outcome for that kind of
Thank you.
workshop.
So it's called the Lunar Domestic Workshop. And again, it's not about let's show some Delta V's and figure out props. It's not about that. It's about getting some of these companies. Some of them have been in business for a bit. Some of them are new, who are thinking about getting investors and finding ways of making money, right? And some of them started at space station. Now we're talking about the moon. And the idea is, you know, I really like this phrase because it gives you a picture. Right now we're talking about in LEO, how could you create a LEO commercial economy where NASA would be one of many customers, right? We are definitely going to be a customer. It'd be nice if other people were doing things there and our fixed costs go down. So part of that is let's talk about that around the moon starting now. So as on the question about how do we create a sustainable architecture, let's think about that, including ways where we can encourage investment. Because I know there's things we can do that kill investment. We've done it. So what are the things, you know, not in a bad way, sometimes you have to do it. This is a nation space program, and sometimes you got to do the nation space program. But are there other ways that you could encourage, and this could be, again, going after the resources. How can we help by finding where these resources are, and then that a company doesn't have to do that themselves, and then they might find a way, hey, they've got a way, they would like to go do something to start selling a service to us. So that's part of what it is. And there's a lot about running a company that, even though I'll just speak for myself, I'm a civil servant, so I'm not an idiot, but I've never run a company. I've never had to make payroll, right? It is a different way of behaving. I've never had to get investors. I've done other negotiating, but I've never had to get investors, right? That's a whole business understanding sense that I think is important for us to know. And then our intent is, again, to take that knowledge and share it with the working folks, the folks that are trying to create procurement strategies and looking through the legal ramifications. So that's the idea. Just asking.
On the academia side, you're trying to infuse inspiration for universities and whatnot.
Yeah, in academia, it's similar but a little bit different, right? What are the things that motivate them for research, things that they might want to spend money on as well? I think we have a lot of expertise in that, but I think it's multiplying that too. Yeah, thank you. Thanks for clarifying that. I think that helps people understand what we're trying to do.
We probably have time for one more question,
Okay.
Mark. What milestones have already been reached for the 2024 goal, and what milestones should we expect to see or achieve in the short term?
For the 2024 goal, so I would say a couple of things. We launched Demo 1. We did 3 EVAs. Boeing's about to do their flight. Orion finished assembly. We did a high fire test at White Sands for Orion. These are all 2024. These all make 2024 happen, so they're all critical. As far as Gateway stood up, we're about to do a procurement on PPE, make some selections on that power prop element. That's a big deal. I mean, it's not an easy thing. It's complicated. That team's doing an awesome job. And we are, like I said, we're probably within the next month or so, we should know the rest of what we've got to start turning on for the lander work. So a lot of stuff. Okay. All right. Hey, thanks again. Thanks for everything you do every day to make these missions happen. Let's keep our eye on the ball of the stuff in the near term, and let's use this opportunity, right, to get back to the moon and use JSC's talent to make it happen. So thank you.